Hello students, welcome to Scholar IAS current affair classes. The objective of this current affair class is threefold basically. One is to help you cover important articles from various sources like Hindu, Indian Express, Financial Express, PIB, etc. And second one is to help you understand how it is related, whatever article that you read is how is it related to the UPSC syllabus. And the third one is you should know how these information that you would be studying now would be asked as a question in UPSC. So we would be trying to cover all these objectives in the articles that we would be going through now. The first article that we would be looking at is Farming and Ecosystem Services. This is an article from Financial Express. So before we get into the content of this article, you will see why we are studying it. This article forms a part of paper 4 of GS3. This would be covered under the issues related to direct and indirect farm subsidies. So once you get to know about the content in this article, you would understand why this article is being covered under this section. So students, let's understand the role of agriculture subsidies in the farming sector before trying to find the linkage between the farming and ecosystem services. The Indian government has been supporting this sector through input subsidies like power, fertilizer, and through minimum support prices as well. And this share is so significant, it's almost 8.5% of the agriculture GDP. So now you understand the depth of this agri subsidies that it plays in the whole sector itself. This is said just to give you a context about the agri sector. The direct question cannot be asked, but you can use this for a mains to support your mains answer writing. So basically, ecosystem services can be classified into four types. One is the provisioning service that deals with food, fodder, fuel, etc. And the second one is the supporting service that would relate to nutrient cycling, soil retention, genetic diversity, soil fertility, etc. Third one would be the regulating service related to pest control, water cycling, pollination, etc. And the final one is the cultural one. So this basically deals with activities like recreational activities, religious activities, tourism, etc. So you have to remember that a potential prelims question can be asked out of this information. You can expect some of these examples being given and asked, it would come under what type of service, what type of ecosystem service. So make sure to remember these things. So agriculture, also being a part of ecosystem, provides all these services. But all these services cannot be monetized except for provisioning services. So we saw that provisioning services deals with what? Food, fodder, fuel, these things. So when we say monetizing, these items, these food, fuel, fodder can be traded and made money out of it. But in case of supporting or regulating services, it is not possible. For example, a rhizobium bacteria fixing nitrogen in a leguminous crop is important one, but it cannot be monetized. So just because it cannot be monetized, it cannot be neglected altogether. So it is important that though even those services that cannot be monetized has to be given importance and has to be protected. There are no market substitute for these services, and if these services are disturbed, it would have a bigger impact on the society as well. While we cannot monetize out of all these services, it is imperative that we give monetary incentives to keep these services intact, this whole ecosystem intact, and how it can be done, why it needs to be done. So one thing is, agriculture as a whole is itself a risky business. That too, with climate change in place, it's very risky for farmers to gain profit out of it. A monetary incentive for promotion of the ecosystem services can boost the farmers to adopt practices that are optimal for the ecosystem. So that is why monetization is very important. But monetization is not that easy, because the primary reason being there is lack of scientific parameters to actually evaluate the biological services that are being provided by the ecosystem. And the second one is identification. Identify how these agricultural practices like cropping pattern, technology, and fertilizer inputs, how these are actually affecting the existing ecosystem services. Without these two, monetization is a challenge. We have come to the second article, that is India-US relations. This becomes a part of GS2 paper. Under GS2 paper, it would come under international relations under the section bilateral groupings and regional groupings that affect India's interest. This article has been in news because of the change in administration that has happened in the USA. The USA's bilateral and multilateral relationship as well as USA's relationship with India both has an impact on India's relationship with other countries. The first one being US-China relation. It has a direct relation between India-China and India-USA. The same way, US policy towards Iran and West Asia has an impact on India, for simple reason that India has its own interest with Iran. If sanctions are imposed on Iran by the USA, then India cannot have any transactions with the Iran or any other West Asian countries. The same way, any change in the administration of USA has an impact on India as well. While we view India-US relations through the prism of China, there are two important factors that we will have to take into account. One being the foundational agreement that India has signed with USA. This brings India and USA closer in terms of military alliance. While it is not directly a military alliance, but it is somewhat nearer to that. And the second one is Quad. So India's participation in Quad, even though it resists Quad from being a military or strategic grouping, there is no other option that it would end up as a military alliance in some time. So this can be anticipated. And this would have an influence, both these factors, the foundational agreement as well as the Quad, can have an impact on India-China relationship and China's reactions towards India. Despite India not wanting to be a part of any military alliance, these two developments, the signing of foundational agreement and India being part of Quad, could potentially turn China hostile towards India. And when that hostility increases, it is potential that the external powers, including USA, to get involved in this bilateral issues between India and China. Similar to the way India-US relationship having an impact on India-China relations, US-Iran relationship also has an impact on India-Iran relation. Iran is strategically and economically important for India in the form of Chabahar port, or let it be the rail project that India has interest on in Iran, or let it be the oil trade. But this importance can be exploited for India's benefit only if the new administration takes an conciliatory approach towards Iran. So it is very important how the new administration views these two relationships, and we have to understand how this can impact India's relationship with these two countries. From mains GS2 paper, you can understand the dynamics of this international relationship and see how you can potentially use these points in the exams. Let's move on to the third article, Election Commission reforms. This would come under GS2 paper under the section constitutional posts and various constitutional bodies. Before we get into this article, we have to understand the composition of Election Commission of India. Article 324 of the Constitution states that the Election Commission would have a Chief Election Commissioner and any number of election commissioners as may be decided by the President. So the Election Commission, the Constitution hasn't set any number when it comes to the strength of the Election Commission, and it has left it to the discretion of the President. and no qualification also has not been given by the constitution itself. So the ECI doesn't have a legal expert, and this affects the ECI in its functioning to interpret the law. In this regard, the Dinesh Goswami committee also made some suggestions in the way how members of ECI are selected, and following that a bill was also introduced in the parliament. Students, remember here, you will have to remember the Dinesh Goswami committee, because a question, prelims question can be asked out of it. Even you can use this information in your mains answer writing, but there is a high possibility a prelims question can be asked. For example, a question like this: Dinesh Goswami committee recently in news is related to which of the following? 4 options can be given, and you know the answer, it is related to electoral reforms. So please ensure that you remember Dinesh Goswami committee. And in addition to these recommendations, there were also demands for inclusion of a retired Supreme Court judge in the Election Commission. This was mainly demanded for the Election Commission to perform some quasi-judicial functions, like relating to disqualification of MPs and MLAs that are currently being dealt by the High Courts, and even interpretation of rules in Representation of People Act. So the recommendations and the demands that are being made seems more meaningful in the current trend. We also have to understand that ECI's opinions are binding on president and governor in cases like disqualification. When they are deciding on the disqualification of MP or MLA, they will have to take opinion from ECI. So in that case, when ECI has such powers, it is imperative that ECI is legally sound, and for that, one way is to make sure that CEC, the Chief Election Commissioner, have same qualifications as those of a judge of a Supreme Court. This is one way to it. Or else we can even consider having a legal expert, a retired Supreme Court judge, as the demand has been made, to be in the group of Election Commission. Either way, the important aspect we have to look here is the legal soundness of the commission itself. So students, this article has dealt only with one particular aspect of reform, that is the inclusion of legal expert in the Election Commission. But a direct question cannot be asked out of this, but these pointers that we have come across in this article could potentially be used in our mains answers. Whenever there is a question that is related, let's say there could be a question on critically analyze the functioning of Election Commission, and when this comes, you can use this part, this legal expert part, and you can make a point out of it, or as a subheading in the question. This way you would be able to bring multiple dimensions into the question. You cannot see this question as a separate, this article as a separate one, rather you would have to be able to integrate with it multiple other aspects. So students, with this we have come to the end of this session. Hope you have understood whatever we have come across. For more videos and current affairs content, subscribe to our channel and visit our platform www.skholar.com, and happy learning. Thank you.